All right, another podcast from the Michigan Institute of Athletics in Brighton, Michigan. It's going to be an awesome podcast today. I can tell through the athletic energy that I'm going to have a good one here with Lee. Right before we get into it, I want to shout out VetLife. VetLife is a 501c3 nonprofit company. It's a company of veterans for veterans. Every veteran faces difficulties when they transition from active duty back to civilian life, and VetLife is there to ease that transition. If you want to reach out to VetLife, you can do so through Instagram or Facebook, or check out their website at vetlifetoday.org. So without further ado, I want to introduce Lee Smith. Lee, this is the way I start all my podcasts. I don't want to know about the man that you are today yet. I want you to take me all the way back. Where were you born and raised? What were you like as a young man? What were the things that were influential to you that, ideals that you sought after, sports heroes, a father figure? What really started to shape you as a young man? And then let's start to unravel your story.
Yeah, no, well, first of all, thank you very much for having me. I'm excited to be on this podcast. But going all the way back, and you can probably tell from my accent, I'm not from the US, so I was born in Birmingham, England. And I always talk about Peaky Blinders. So for those that are familiar with Peaky Blinders, that is set in Birmingham, England, which is about 100 miles north of London. Very blue collar. So has a lot of similarities with Detroit in terms of it being a manufacturing hub. That's where the Industrial Revolution started. That's where I was born. My old man was a fireman, so raised in a very blue collar family. And I love sports. I was a big soccer fan or football fan. I'm a West Bromwich Albion fan, for those that are wondering. Unfortunately, we're in the Championship, which is below the Premier League, but we're trying to get back to the Premier League. And I think growing up, the things that really influenced me, obviously my parents, and I've got a strong work ethic, first and foremost. And from the age of 11, I've always worked. And I'll be 49 later this year. And so I remember when I was 11 and I wanted something. And my dad said, look, if you want it, then you've got to work, you've got to earn money, and then you can buy it yourself. And so from age 11, I got a paper round. 4 mornings a week, I'd get up at 6 o'clock, work the paper round, then go to school. And then as I got older, it moved from a paper round to stacking shelves in a supermarket when I was 16, 17, 18. And then even when I was at university, I would come home during the holidays and work in a packing shed for a friend's dad and get paid £2.50 an hour. But that's what you did. You were introduced to that strong work ethic. And if you wanted something, you earned the money and then you could go and buy it and you didn't have to ask or rely on anybody else. So I think that is a fundamental skill that I learned. The other thing that I did, I've always been a big sports fan, and I played soccer when I was a kid, a teenager, and at university. And this is sort of the next lesson that I really learned a lot from. And I remember when I first started playing football, soccer, I just loved the game, playing with my buddies. And you were sort of, as I got into sort of the middle teens and later teens, it was really more about, did I have a good game? Did I score a goal? That's sort of how you reflected on the game. I remember after I moved to university, and I was at Loughborough University, which is in the East Midlands, big sporting university, and that's kind of another story. The only reason I wanted to go there, it wasn't because of the degree, which I'll get onto later, which is actually shaped where I am today. I just wanted to kick a ball around. I just wanted to play football. I was hoping Man United were going to sign me. I wanted to be David Beckham before David Beckham. Unfortunately, I didn't have the talent of David Beckham, but I played at university. And in my final year, I was captain of the football team. And that's when I started to really appreciate teamwork and things not just being about you, but about everybody else. And what I mean by that is when you're the captain of a team, now it's about how did the team do? Did we win? Did we lose? How did we play as a team? It's not about you. It's how did the team do? And then the other thing that taught me, which was an invaluable life lesson, is that's how you started to figure out everyone has a different personality and everybody is motivated differently. And I'll give you an example. I played in midfield and there was a guy next to me whose nickname was Banger. And he only responded if you were screaming at him every single minute of the game. Even if he was having a great game, you still had to be on him, because if you weren't, his standards would drop. So you're on him. We had a kid who played on the wing, Irish kid, Fergal, the most skillful player on the team, a real difference maker. But if you shouted at him, he would go into his shell, wouldn't want the ball, and you were done. You've lost him for the game. And so what I learned was you just needed to go and put your arm around him, tell him you love him, keep encouraging him. I would stop the other players, from screaming, even if they were frustrated with him. And that's when I really started to appreciate how you manage people, the importance of teamwork, and the importance of knowing that everybody's different and everyone brings something different to the team. But you need that. If you were all the same, it's not going to work. And so, that was another big life experience for me.
That's brilliant. I mean, you got to witness the complexity of leadership in that role is what it was. Is because there is no one size fits all. And if you try to manage people that way, you will always create difficult cultures because people don't respond the same. And I found the same thing through athletics. I mean, learning to be a coach was a difficult skill because managing people is not something you're ready for until you're thrown in the situation. I don't care how many books you've read. I don't care how many workshops you've gone through or things you've heard about leadership. It is so incredibly dynamic. But you alluded to it. If you had everybody that was the same, you would lack in several areas. You need this complexity of people to build something that's worthy. You need that guy that is so incredibly talented, and all you got to do is have his back. You got to encourage that man, and he's going to make magic happen with the ball. But then you need the other guy that is a raw, intense figure that as long as he's fired up and believes that, it's go time, he's going to make plays happen. Sports introduces us to so many things that parallel with life. Do you remember your first great coach or your first inspirational leader or someone that changed your life because they brought greatness out of you? Because I think when you see things like that, when you have someone in life that brings greatness to the table, you go, wow, there is a way that you can make people more than what they are. Do you remember that?
Yeah, and I will fast forward now to my work life, and I can count on one hand the people that have really made a difference in my life from a career and a work point of view. And I'll go back to my after college, university. I'm an accountant. I worked at Ernst & Young, and there was a partner there, William Tacon, and he just believed in me. And when I say he believed in me, he would ream me out. There were many times when, we were working on a project and I would do something and he would call me into his office and he would go at it. But having played sports, I realized that don't be defensive. Listen to the feedback. It's making you better. You've got to be humble, and you've got to appreciate that here's a guy who's got 25 years on me. He's got the experience, and he's doing this to make me better. He's not doing this, because he's trying to be awkward or funny or negative. He's trying to make me better. And I learned a tremendous amount from William. And he did. He showed me skills that I still use today. And because he believed in me, it was he that made the move from the UK to the US, New York, happen. And he went out of his way to speak with the highest people in the UK and the US at Ernst & Young to facilitate that. And he has undoubtedly had a big influence on my life, and I respect what he did. I mean, it's about believing in people, being a good mentor, and sharing knowledge, your knowledge and experiences with them so they can be better. And that's what William did.
And I think you made such a killer point right there where you said, like, I had to not get defensive and realize if this man's trying to bring the best out of me and his intent is to make me grow and prosper and flourish, then, like, I should welcome this. Even though it might be uncomfortable in the temporary, it might be difficult, I might feel like I'm getting chewed out, it's going to bring out the best of you. And that almost relates to that old quote of, like, people don't care what you know until they know that you care. And if you believed in him, that if you believed in the fact that he had your best interest in mind and you didn't put up that defense, that's probably why you two created that trajectory of growth.
No doubt about it. I mean, I knew he had my back. And that's how, I lead today. I have got my team's back. But that doesn't mean, we can't challenge each other. And that doesn't mean that if we have a disagreement, we can't get into a room and we can hash it out. But once we get out of that room, we're all on the same page. And when we're together externally, we're one team. And we defend each other and we look after each other. And as a leader today, my role is to make sure that my team have the tools and the platform to be as successful as they can possibly be. And I want them to tell me what they need, and I will support them, and I'll run through brick walls to make it happen for them.
You're recreating that culture. I mean, that is what I do in here. In here, we have these fighters going after each other day in and day out, trying to expose weakness. They're trying to find areas where there are flaws or where we should be stepping up more because the battles don't exist within our team. These battles are irrelevant. The battles exist outside of these walls. So it's like if we can bring out the best in each other and find any chinks in the armor and repair them here, when it's time for battle, we're prepped. And I remember one of my mentors, I had briefly told you about him before the podcast, guy's like just turned 31, 8-figure net worth, absolute tycoon. He wants to own a professional sports team one day. So he wants to buy a soccer team or something one day. And I'm like, hey, as long as I can be in the booth. He talks about something he calls mining for conflict. In his companies, he said, I go in and I get my people to search for conflict. Not in a negative way, but if we looked at this with our imagination, with different perspectives, with all other viewpoints that we can conjure up, where are the areas of congestion or where are the areas of growth that are limited by our current belief system or structure status? And he said, that's been a game changer. They don't view conflict as a terrible thing. They view it as a process by which you discover gold. And it's like that type of mindset, I can tell why you're in the position that you're in. You know what I mean? You've embraced what you saw in athletics that yielded success, what you then saw from a mentor that brought the best out in you, and now you are applying those concepts to your company culture.
Right. And that is to your friends, that's how you unlock value. You look for those areas of conflict or areas other people will dismiss or won't want to look into because it is going to be aggravation and it is going to be, people don't want to deal with conflict typically. But if you can find that out and you're comfortable, that's where you unlock value. And you've reminded me, because bringing sport and business together, my favorite business book is Moneyball. And what I love about that is talk about thinking differently to achieve success. So, everybody's familiar with the story. You've got the New York Yankees, who had all the money in the world, would buy all the superstars. And you had the Oakland A's under Billy Beane, who their payroll was a fraction of the Yankees. But they used data, metrics to relook how you assess a player and the game of baseball. And they went ahead and brought in players that fit that model and were very, very, they didn't win a World Series, but they were very, very successful, very competitive. The reason I like that from a business point of view is anyone can apply Moneyball. If you can, and we do it at Flagstar, which is where I work now, because we don't have the money that a JP Morgan Chase or a Wells or a B of A has. So we've got to think a little differently. But if you're prepared to think outside the box, think more creatively, you can still be competitive. And if you're thinking creatively, that's how you move boundaries. And you'll find that others ultimately will latch on to what you're doing, like they have with the Oakland A's. And now everybody, even the Yankees, despite having all the money, they still use data. And I think what that proved was the other thing with a great team, it's not just putting the best athletes that you can buy together. If the chemistry doesn't work and you don't have the right leadership, it's going to fail.
1,000%. And there's so many metrics beyond just like company valuation that matter, because at the end of the day, there could be, I'll just relate it to an MMA world. For a long period, it wasn't the superstar gyms that were producing the world champions. Like, American Top Team is funded by a billionaire. They have the nicest resources. They have the nicest facility. And yet they didn't have their first world champion for almost like so long in existence. And yet Conor McGregor had basically a garage in Dublin, Ireland. But you know what he had? Community, culture, positive leadership, people that believed in him from the bottom of their heart and told him that, like, you can accomplish these things. And so often people look at the titans of industry and they're like, well, we're not them. And they shackle themselves with that belief. It's like, it's not just the metric of, does our company produce more? What about what kind of lives does our company produce for the people that are part of it? What kind of relationship can we deliver to a customer, because we are not confined by some of the chains that maybe the mega institutions are? They have to implement such strict processes because just the flat out volume they're going to take on, versus you guys can have more flexibility to say, hey, how do we take the best of what they do, but also the best of what we can create, and really bring it together into one entity? I feel like if you get everyone on board on that type of mentality, you're almost thankful that, like, you don't have a lot of the chains that the mega people play with.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. And I think sometimes big organizations can be constrained because they're too rigid. There's too much protocol. There's too much process.
Red tape everywhere.
Red tape and bureaucracy everywhere. And we always say, I mean, you talk about the customer. We always say, make the customer experience your point of difference. Go the extra mile and do whatever you need to do to make the customer happy, because if the customer has a good experience, they're going to keep coming back to you. And it's like, you go to a restaurant and you pay a premium, but you have great experience, you'll keep going back to that restaurant. And the other thing that we preach and really believe in, that good customer experience, it isn't just to external customers. It's how we treat each other internally, right? Because if you treat each other with respect and you get an email, respond to it. And it doesn't mean you have to have an answer, but you just acknowledge, hey, got your email, I'm looking at it, just give me 2 days, I'll be back to you. So people know that you received it. It teaches that respect. And if you've got that sort of level of service internally, it permeates externally and it starts to build trust. I'm a big believer. It doesn't matter whether it's a personal relationship or a business relationship. If you don't have trust, you don't have anything. But if you've got the service and you've got the trust, now you're seen as a valued business advisor and people seek out your opinion. They want you to have a seat at the table, and it doesn't get more powerful than that. And I think that is then combined with, we believe in accountability. We believe that, big believer in Jim Collins' Good to Great. And that book is, if you put the right people in the right seats on the bus, good things will happen. You don't have to micromanage good people, because good people make good decisions. You do give them the tools and the platform to be as successful as they can. You empower them to make decisions. You give them the authority to make decisions. And if you've got that great service, the trust, good people who want to be accountable, you've got something very powerful.
1,000%. I mean, are you familiar with John Maxwell, the 5 levels of leadership?
Yes, yeah.
You're speaking exactly to the points that he makes, where it's like the best culture is almost, it's not even so much that I can count on you, it's that I can count on me to do what I should do within this company and adhere to the company culture and really give my best, and you should be able to count on you to do the same. And then you can then learn to trust me to do what I am asking you to do as well. It's that two-way street, because so often it's like, yeah, well, I would have done my job, but this person didn't do that. And that is the framework for failure. You need to look at how can you take personal responsibility and accountability and extreme ownership to say, I will make sure that I do this to the fullest of my capability. And if there's any way that I can get to a next level and you want to provide that feedback, I'm on board because I'm on that game. And if you just subscribe to the same methodology, we're going to succeed here. Because it's on a football team. If you're killing it and you're working hard and damn well the person next to you has done the same things and they're giving 100%, you don't have to speak about the relationship of trust. It exists. The fighters train next to each other every single day. So when that one person's going to war or they have to count on them, they've witnessed the character that has been built through the hours in the lab. So it's effortless. The trust doesn't have to be, preached like you need to trust them. It just happens.
Yeah.
That's what we're speaking of here.
No doubt about it. And so going back to good to great, level 5 leadership. And level 5 leadership, no egos. And if the team is successful, you give all the credit to the team. If it goes wrong, as the leader, you take full and absolute responsibility. And so when something doesn't work out, the last thought, you shouldn't think, negatively and who are we going to blame? The first thought should be, okay, what could I do better as the leader to stop this from happening again? What am I going to change about what I did to ensure that we are successful going forward? And I think you're right. There's people are too quick in this day and age. If something doesn't quite work out, they want to point fingers. And you shouldn't do that. You've got to take accountability yourself first and foremost and ask yourself before looking externally, what could I have done differently? Where could I be stronger, better? And that's where you start.
And maybe it's as simple as, could I have just identified this issue earlier on and prevented it? Because some of the times it's like you might look internally and say, man, I really did what I was supposed to do. But there's a saying in jiu-jitsu that I know you're going to appreciate where it's you either win or you learn. And if you view things that way, it's like you just got handed this lead that can be transformed to gold. If you just recognize, I either won, and then it's great. And, a lot of times winning leads to complacency. And winning can actually stop growth more than failure will. And if you view it that way, I either win or I learn. And it might even just be identification. It might be able to say, you know what, I see a problem that is potentially starting to manifest. I'll just address it now because I know where it leads me if I don't. So I have a couple questions that I'd love to break down further. Let's talk about your ascent up the ladder a little bit because it sounds like you saw leadership in sports. You were a part of these cultures. There's so many parallels that are fitting in your life. You had a man that really, went to bat for you and got you here to the United States. As you started to move up through the ranks, how did you really develop yourself into the leader that you are today? Like, you embrace it now. I can tell it. I can see it in your eyes when you're telling the story. Like, you understand that leadership role. But that was built over time. Kind of talk about that progression up through the ranks. Did you ever experience imposter syndrome, where it's like you started to get to a role where people feel like they're not really justified to have that role. They're not ready for it. And then how did you work through that, et cetera? I think there's a lot of magic in that part of your story.
Yeah, no problem at all. I think, so there's a couple of things that I would say. First of all, and we touched on this earlier, I obviously made the move from the UK to the US. And then I'll talk about some other moves that happened during my career to get me to where I am today. And a couple of things that I would point out I think are important. You never know who you're going to meet on any given day. And because one day you can meet someone out of the blue who can open doors and make things happen for you. And that's what I'm going to describe in a minute. And so be the best you can be every day because you never know who's paying attention and watching you and what they can make happen. And so, given where I am today, it isn't something that you wake up one morning as a kid and say, I'm going to be the president of Mortgage of Flagstar. It's a sequence of events that are somewhat, that it happens. But when you break it down, it's because along the way I've met just 3-4 people who have opened doors for me. But in some situations, the people that I met, I didn't know them that long, but be the best you can every day and bring your A game because you just never know who's watching. But I was at Ernst & Young and in the U. So now I'm over in the US in the restructuring group of Ernst and Young. And when you're in a
What age are you? I'm sorry.
yeah. So now I'm 28. So I moved to the US in 2002 from the UK. So I'm now in the restructuring group because just as a sidebar, what I found when I was in audit bored the hell out of me. After 6 months, I remember thinking, I got to get out of here. And the thing with audit is you're always looking back. I didn't feel you're not looking forward. You're not creating value, and you had to stay in audit for 3 years to get the accounting, the chartered accounting qualification. So I kind of sucked it up, did my 3 years, and then I loved Ernst & Young, moved to their restructuring and insolvency area. Now, you're dealing with sick companies, so the insolvency and restructuring part of the firm, you're going into companies that are about to fail, have failed, and you've got to take them through sort of a Chapter 11 type process and try and rehabilitate them. So it's almost like being a doctor, but for companies versus people. You learn a lot in those situations because you're getting parachuted in to real problematic situations. Companies failing, people are going to lose their jobs, the company can't pay its bills, you've got creditors, vendors, people aren't very happy with you. So these situations are stressful, and you've got to move quickly and decisively to sort of figure them out. But I learned a lot about dealing with high pressure situations, and it's a bit like sport. You know, you've got a big fight, and that's a high pressure situation, and you've got to be able to control your thoughts. You've got to be controlled mentally. You've got to know what your plan is, and you've got to stick to it, even though things are going to come up that try and throw you off track, where unexpected things. But you've got to stay true to the game plan, and you've got to have belief in what you're doing. And so, you know, that's something else I learned. And then when I was at Ernst & Young, I met a guy at a company called Zolfo Cooper, who hired me. They were a restructuring and turnaround shop in New York. And so I moved over there and was having a great time at Zolfo Cooper. I was there about 5 years. And then I was working on a home builder in Florida. And a private equity fund tried to buy this home builder that I was working on. And I remember the day they came in, I'm sat there as the advisor because I'm with Zolfo Cooper, and you've got the management team. And the private equity fund comes in, and they had 4 or 5 hours, and they just were asking questions of the management team. And I remember the management team couldn't answer many of the questions, and I'm sort of sat at the end of the table as the advisor. So I'm just answering when there was silence, I was just answering the questions because I was familiar with the numbers, the model, what was going on, and didn't think very much of it. And then a couple of months later, that private equity fund called me and said, "Can we talk to you?" And I went and spoke to them, and they said, "Look, we would like you to come and join us. We need someone with your skill sets internally here because we buy distressed companies, but we're deal guys. We need someone who can go in and work with the management to put the turnaround plan together before we sell it." And so, you know, coming back to what I was saying earlier, I had no idea that day in Florida that this meeting was going to have such an influence on my life. And so the private equity company was Matlin Patterson. They subsequently reached out, and I joined them as the operating partner. And that was in 2010. And then I was working for Matlin Patterson for a couple of years on all sorts of different companies all over the world. One was in Argentina. You had a company they had in Texas, in Philadelphia. They had an airline company in Atlanta, and I was loving it. And then they said in 2012, we need you to get involved in this bank that we own called Flagstar, and based in Michigan. And I said sure, and I started coming out to the bank early 2012. And what was apparent very early on is the leadership at that point were not engaged with the organisation. They weren't visible. There was really no strategy. There was nothing that was being communicated to to the entire workforce. So people really didn't know, what are we trying to accomplish here? What's the strategy? What's the game plan that people could get behind? And so, and there was also a lot of problems with the regulators. And I remember relaying this to the principals at Matlin Patterson, and this was a big investment for those guys. And there was a little bit of denial, and I think they would admit that. And then you fast forward to the summer of 2012, and the main regulator served the company with a consent order, and that's when it was obvious that, okay, we've got to make some changes here. So we did. Towards the end of that summer, we changed the management team, and we put an interim CEO in, and I was continuing to stay involved in the organisation, and I started working very closely with a guy called Sandro Danello. And he was in charge of all the bank branches of Flagstar, and we subsequently made him the president, not the CEO, the president. And while Sandro and I were working together for 6-7 months, at the end of 2012, beginning of 2013, it was obvious that Sandro should be our permanent CEO. And in April of 2013, we told Sandro that he was going to be the permanent CEO. And when we did, he said, "Why don't you come on board as the COO?" And because he and I had been working together very closely, and so there is another person who I can absolutely count, on one of my fingers, who has been incredibly influential in where I am today. And so I was living in New York at the time with my girlfriend. We had a 1-year-old or a baby that was just about to turn 1, 1,000 square foot apartment, plastic stuff everywhere. You couldn't move. And we were looking to get out of the city. And so now it was, we're moving to Michigan. And so we moved to Michigan and took on the role as the COO. At the same time, Sandro was CEO. And the two of us then embarked on the turnaround of Flagstar, and I mean, I cannot speak highly enough of Sandro. What I've learned from him. I mean, he's almost like a father figure to me, and again, someone who has just been inspirational, and not just to me. I think if you ask anybody at Flagstar, they would all speak incredibly highly of Sandro and how he treats people.
I mean, and how great is that to look at your leadership and feel that way? You know what I mean? To look to your leadership and say, like, this is the type of man that I would follow into battle, that I can count on to give 100% and he can count on me. Like, that is the dream. That's what you want in a company. You're going to have to work to get by. You spoke to something that I want to address that I think is so brilliant, even though you said it so quickly and so simply, and so many people might just go right by it. Any moment of your life could be a dot that when you look back is a drastic change in your life. Like Steve Jobs has that famous quote where he says, you can't connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect them looking backwards. And you just have to trust that the dots will line up in your future. Well, a part of that is being 100% in the endeavors that you do and really showing up at your best and giving your best and showing the world the capabilities and potential you have as a human being, because you don't know. Like when you're just sitting in that conference center and you're answering these questions, if you don't present the caliber of human being that you are, maybe that door never opens. Maybe you stay with that company. And I think what you see with a lot of businesses, with people in general, it's like when they first set sail out on the ship towards the destination they want to arrive at. There's so much good energy and they're excited and the captain's taking charge and everyone knows their roles and they're going. And then somewhere along the lines, you're not at the destination yet, and the ship just starts to just be at sea.
Yep.
And you lose that enthusiasm, and you lose that passion. And it's like, yeah, the ship is floating. It's not sinking, so no one's panicking yet. But you've lost the drive that was supposed to propel you into the future. And that drive is essential. And it has to be filled again. It's like an empty gas tank. You have to make it a point to put gas back in the vehicle to keep it moving. And what you told in your story is there's these plateau moments of your life where most people would have been satisfied enough. You're at a good job, you can pay the bills, you can get by, and they've hit a plateau. And a lot of people set up their camp there and say, you know what, I've made it. This is where it's at. And the only difference with someone like you is you've continued to stay on point, and you found out that that plateau wasn't your peak. It was just a step on the journey. And like, if more people would put energy into recognizing that every day could be a moment that drastically changes your life if you learn how to show up at your best, I think that's a game changer. And I think you just told that in that part of your story.
So a couple of things that I would say. So we've talked about being your best every day, because you never know who you're going to meet and what doors they can open for you. But when those opportunities arise, do not be afraid to take them. So, for example, when I was at Ernst & Young in the UK, and they came to me and said, hey, we need to develop closer links with Ernst & Young in the US from a restructuring point of view. We need someone to go over there for 18 months on a secondment. Do you want to do it? And it took me less than a second to say yes, because...
Hold on. Stop. Where does that come from? Most people, the second they're presented with that, fear, doubt...
Change. They fear change.
100%. And they shut down. That comes to them and they go, let me talk to my wife or girlfriend, or let me think about it. And then they follow back up and say, no. Where does that come from? Because that's not normal, Lee.
Yeah, I think it probably comes from, I'm inquisitive. I want to learn more. I want to push myself. I've always been fascinated with traveling. I've been fortunate enough to have done a lot of traveling. And so my natural reaction is always, my first reaction is to say yes, not no. It's not to look for excuses. It's to look for reasons to be able to do it. And I think it's the same with just a simple job offering, because it might be in another part of the country. People can always look for excuses to say, oh, I don't want to do that because it's going to affect my routine, or let me check with my boyfriend, girlfriend, partner, family. You can always find excuses not to do something. But once you turn something down, that opportunity, not only is the opportunity lost forever, if you take that opportunity, you have no idea how it's going to shape the rest of your life and other people that you're then going to meet as a result of that. It's a little bit like fate. And so, I would advise people, when something is presented to you, take it. Because even if you go somewhere and you don't like it, the worst case, you can always go back. But once you say no to something, that door is closed forever.
1,000%. And it's like everyone wants to think of everything they could lose or what might be different, but they don't think about what they could gain or the beautiful adventure that it could be. I can tell you're an avid reader. You've cited a couple books. I'm going to give you one that if you haven't read, there's a children's book. It's almost written to be a children's book called Who Moved My Cheese?
Right.
It is the quintessential example of that ideology, where it's simply, you may have a little bit of cheese and you can get by right now and things are fine and you're comfortable, and like, who knows what's out there in the abyss. But if you choose to live that way, you're going to limit yourself to a level that you can't even comprehend. And I have this quote that's haunted me since I was a young man that says, the only hell in life is meeting the person you could have become. And that quote has chased me. It's like most people's fears stand in front of them and they think, I can't do this because of that. My fear is chasing me every day saying, what if you are a fraction of the man that you should have been in this life? What if this life had more adventure and more wonderful things than you could ever imagine, and you never sought to achieve them because you let the fear of, well, what if this changes stop you? It's like, you just got to realize that life really can be beautiful, even if it's not right now. And it can be more abundant and more, but you have to invest in yourself. You have to appreciate the people that are around you that can help you. You have to cherish good relationships. You have to know right from wrong. You have to know good versus evil. You have to know these things. If you don't have a foundation, how are you going to stand on everything? You won't even have, that's like your roadmap. And if you don't have a roadmap to get to where you're going to go, you're just going to wander. And I feel like the reason these dialogues are so powerful is like, this is common. This is what successful people will tell you. It's like the information is not what is lacking to change people's lives. It's the fear confrontation. It's that making a decision. I want to dig a little bit deeper into, yes, you have a sense of adventure. Yes, of all these things. But where does the confidence come from? Were you gifted in athletics growing up? Were you popular? Was it your family unit, you think, that structured you to know that, like, look, I've been working hard since I was 11 years old. I had a paper route. I did this. I did that. Why can't I be the guy that does this? Which, by the way, I ran a paper route when I was a young kid, and then I went to stocking shelves after that. And then I built it. While you were telling me that part of your story, I'm going, well, okay, that's crazy. We have the same thing.
There you go.
And I'm a sports nut. So where do you think it was that gave you that foundation to be the man that takes his sword and shield and no matter what's in front of you says, I'm going to go get this done?
Yeah, I think it goes back to my family, really. I mean, they just taught me real core values, and it's, it's be respectful, be the best you possibly can be. Don't do things half-heartedly. Be kind, always do the right thing. And so, something I always say, because people will say, oh, how do you sleep at night? With you got all this going on. I sleep very well at night because I know at the end of each day, I've done the right thing. I've been the best I can possibly be, and I've given it my all. And I got a great team, and I'm doing everything I can to support the team. And if you do that, you can sleep well at night. And if you're doing that, people respond to that. I think, to your point, right, if you just do good and want to be good and you're kind and you're respectful and you appreciate others, good things are going to happen. And so that is sort of the foundation of it. And I wouldn't say, I think the confidence, it's really more experiences through life. And so, being in sporting situations where, the chips are against you, being in business situations where you get parachuted into a company that's, failing and underperforming, you got to move quickly. So you actually get to a point where you're very comfortable dealing with whatever the situation is. It's almost like, okay, we got this, right? Because this is what we need to do. This is how we're going to sort of divide and conquer. We're going to put a plan together. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. So it's not so much confidence. It's more you just feel confident in we're going to handle this situation, and that's where it's not sort of necessarily self-confidence. It doesn't matter what you throw at us, throw at me. We're going to be able to deal with it and handle it. Don't sweat the small stuff. And if you're prepared and if you're thoughtful and you've got a great team around you, you'll be able to accomplish anything.
It honestly makes sense. You're not so attached to the result. You're only attached to the work that you're going to do. You're like, I'm going to give 100% and I'm going to try to give the best solution possible. But at the end of the day, that happens in fighting.
Yep.
If all you can control is to show up at your best. And you know what? If there's a man that's just simply better than you, it gives you a blueprint that you get to go back and it's win or learn. You know what? The times that will break your heart are when you did not give 100%. It is not your losses. It is the times where you were a lesser version of what you know you should have been. That's what haunts you.
Yep.
So I'm fascinated by the way that you described. I could almost feel your passion through the microphone when you said, like, I got to go into a company and basically like diagnose the issues. It's like you got to be almost like an investigative journalist where you're trying to figure out, where did this thing go off the rails? What went wrong? In a culture where entrepreneurship is very like the ranges are so extreme, it's not really the foundation of what we teach children in school. Like, if you're going to be an entrepreneur in America, good luck. I mean, you are going to have so much adversity and stress and tragedy and heartbreak. But if you can figure it out, you may live one of the most beautiful lives out there because you've created something. Where are when you're looking at companies from this higher perspective without being emotionally involved in the process, where do you think the most common failures take place for people that are trying to run these businesses and projects? Because generally there is a leadership, there is a culture, there are these things. From your point of view, what is it that separates like a Flagstar that is now crushing it, that's putting your company in order, you're doing well, versus all these businesses that you were looking at that at one point in time probably had passion, probably had good leadership, probably had all these things that we might speak of? Why did you see so many of these companies failing, or is there not really a common theme?
It can be different things in terms of you can always have macro events that sort of create issues. But if you're looking more for a common theme around culture, then yes there is. And I think what I've seen most often is ego. You've got leadership with too much ego. They think that they walk on water, and they don't operate as a team. They don't listen to their team, and they just push down. And so, when I think about, we've talked about some of the values at Flagstar, the service and the trust and the accountability and having good people. But it's all predicated on teamwork. You'll hear a lot of people talk about teamwork. And this is obviously, again, coming from sport and playing football or soccer when I was younger. But teamwork, to me, is about collaboration. It's working together collaboratively and helping each other because we're stronger together. If you've got a team that's working well together, or you've got a team of individuals, the cohesive team is going to beat the team of individuals every day. Big believer in communication. And communication isn't just top down. Communication is bottom up, and it's across an organization. If you're sharing knowledge, we're all better off for it. And so I mentioned earlier, I want to make sure the team has the tools and the platform to be as successful as they can be. You've got to tell me, what do you need? What isn't working? Whenever I go and have meetings with the team, the first question I ask is, I don't need you to tell me what's going well. Tell me what ticks you off. What can we be doing better? Because that's how you're going to make the organization better. I don't need to know what's going well. Tell me what ticks you off, because that's what we need to fix. And then the final part of the teamwork is transparency. Anyone should be able to talk to anybody about anything on any day, at any time. And I remember, again, going back to Sandro and myself, if he came into my office and said, "Hey, Lee, I'm going to go and sit in on one of your direct reports team meetings," I would say that's fantastic. They're going to love it. But it's amazing how many companies today still have these silos, and people are very protective of what they're managing, and they're afraid for hierarchy to come into that. And you shouldn't have that. You should be totally confident and transparent in your team and everything that you're doing. And the door should always be open. And I think if you've got that, that's what team, you've got that collaboration, you've got that communication flowing in all directions, you've got that transparency. That's very, very powerful.
And you know what? People probably feel heard, and they feel valued, and they feel like they make a difference in the company. And it's like, not only does communication flow, then respect flows. And you know what? If that's not a common theme among elite companies or businesses or anything, is respect from the bottom up and the top down, because it only operates if everyone's on board giving their best.
Exactly. Titles do not interest me. I am not worried about. We're all in this together, and whatever we all need to do to make sure that we're successful, we will do, right? We're all rowing in the same direction. And so I've never been interested. You can call me anything you like. I don't care, because I just want to make sure as a team, as a collective, we win. And if we're not winning, to your point, what have we learned, and what do we need to do to get ourselves in a position to win?
You just spoke to one of the things that I think plagues most companies. And there's this old mindset belief where, like, the managers almost like hammer down the people underneath them, and it's like, you will perform or else. And it's almost like a leadership through fear, and they are very closed off. What you just spoke about, like, everybody has their own silos. I don't know if it's from a place of insecurity, or like maybe that's how you're like, well, I feel like I'm going to keep my job if no one else, can rise to the level that I'm at. Because like, you'll witness people that'll almost put their thumb on the people's heads below them. And instead of teaching them the skills that would make them the best versions of themselves, which in turn rewards the company, they don't do that. It's like a hierarchy through dominance and suppression versus a hierarchy. Like, there is a hierarchy in any company, culture, anything, but it can be this like positive flow of energy. I think you're speaking to that. Do you think it's just a limiting belief that maybe the managers have, or a lack of training, or a lack of leadership from the top down? Because you see that across the board.
It's undoubtedly, it's a lack of training and a lack of experience, because one size does not fit all. You cannot, if the only style you've got is to threaten, bully, you're not going to last long. And by the way, you're not going to have a team for long, because those people are not going to respect that style of leadership, and they're going to leave. And so it comes down to knowing the personalities of your team, and everyone's personality is different. So everybody's motivated in a different way, and you've got to understand that. And this is the whole sport analogy as well. But the other thing that I think people don't realize when they're in a leadership position is 99.9% of people enjoy learning new things. It's exciting to learn how to solve a problem, learning a new language, learning a new skill set. And so if you're able to show people, hey, I know we've always done things this way, but what about if we do things this way? Maybe it's a little more efficient. Maybe we can have a better customer experience. Maybe we can shorten the time frame, of delivery to the customer. And once you start to show people things, then I think people are much more open. And so it's about how you you treat people with respect. It's not one size fits all. And I think coming back to sport, I think Nick Saban mentioned maybe only 2 times a year can he go into the dressing room at half time with Alabama and scream at them, because he said otherwise it just won't have an impact. So I can only maybe get away with that twice a season and hope that it makes a difference. But if I'm doing that more than twice, I've lost them.
100%. Your employees would be calloused. That would just be the normal. It'd be, here we go again. Let's listen to this again. 100%. And you just spoke to something that people do want to grow, but it is uncomfortable for them. So if you can extend your hand in an offer to assist them and not make them feel low level or like a loser, if you come at someone with your guns out saying you have underperformed here and you should be doing this, they're going to shell right up and they're not going to do anything. But if you can encourage them, support the level that they're at right now and say, hey, there's growth here and I'll go through this journey with you. We're going to do this together. That's what moves the needle, because people are generally moved by the way that they feel. The limbic system controls most people. It's not even your conscious thought. It's the way that you feel. So if I encourage you, I make you believe there's more to you than what you recognize right now. All I try to do for my students is I'm a mirror. I'm don't even look to me. Look at within yourself. There is more than you realize, and we're going to seek that greatness together. And I'm going to try to level up, and I want you to try to level up. It's the same thing. You're trying to get someone to a new mindset, belief system, activity, whatever it is. But the presentation's everything.
There's no doubt about it. And also, take an athlete or someone in business. If you are just saying you've got to get better, but you don't show them how, then they're just going to keep doing the same thing. It's the definition of insanity, right? Doing the same thing but expecting a different result. And so, if you then show them, hey, maybe think about doing it this way, and you're with them every step of the way, the first 2 or 3 times, then it's a harmony. People are like, oh, I did not, now I get it, and now I can apply it. And it's the same in sport, in fighting. It's, hey, you're using this technique, but what about if you change it up and do this? And it's only when people are shown, and then they're like, oh, I get it, and they enjoy learning something new, they appreciate the difference it's making, then it starts to snowball. But if you're just screaming at someone but offering no advice, obviously no encouragement, and not showing them the way, you're not. The result is never going to change.
And to be honest, it's not even their failure at that point.
It's not. It's you.
100%. I'm glad you just acknowledged that. It would be a failure of leadership.
Correct.
Because unfortunately, if you become a leader in our society, no matter what level of leader that is, you now have a burden and responsibility on yourself. You have to be a higher standard. I recently was on another podcast with a friend of mine who runs a franchise across the country, and he brought me on and he said, James, what does leadership look like to you? And I said, honestly, one of the simplest things that I think is the reason that people follow me is I have to live in a way that inspires people. I have to live in a way that they look to me and want to listen to my words. They have to look at wow, this guy has himself in order. He takes care of himself. He's improving constantly. He's able to look back at his own setbacks or failures and try to level up, and he gives to the people around him. If they're inspired by me, they're way more willing to be like, this dude cares about me. is living a good life and wants to help me level up. And that's the type of person you want to go to battle with. You learned that on the soccer field. You saw from like the way you had to treat the Irishman was different than the way you had to treat Banger.
Yeah.
And it was like, that was a secret. You were being taught a lesson that was going to pay, a million dividends later on in your business career. So we are at the hour mark. We're at 1:00. I'm enjoying this dialogue so much, but I do not want to keep you at, all I'd like to say is if we have to wrap it up now, just any messaging that you would give to your company within Flagstar, to your family that's, like, we haven't even got to talk about your family. That was another part I wanted to talk to you about was when you're this type of individual that's going, seeking, growing, gaining, trying to level up, like usually that is hard to juggle a healthy relationship with at the same time, be the best father you can be. I would believe that you as a competitor, you've probably like, well, I can give my best here, but it is very difficult. The sacrifice that comes with trying to be a high-level man in society or high-level woman is tremendous. And a lot of people don't know how to pour into multiple buckets. They know how to be 1,000% in one realm, but then they're 0% in another realm or 10%. And it's easy to make excuses and say, yeah, but I've given all my energy. And well, guess what? The other person that needs a lot out of you too doesn't want to hear that. So if we have to hardline this thing, it's more than fine. I'd love you to just say in the future, like, what is the direction you're trying to build with Flagstar? If you could send a message to your whole company, what would you say? Just anything you'd like to wrap up. If not, and we can go a little further, I'd love to talk about those buckets of how do you stay sane in your personal life? What are the activities and things that you've found that take care of you? Because if you cannot show up at your best, at some point the whole thing's going to blow up.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. A couple of things that I would say, and I'm not going to tell you that I'm perfect because it is hard to trying to balance work, your career, your personal life, your family, working in communities and non-profits, and trying to give as much as you can. It's hard to sort of equate that all out, and I'm not going to pretend that I'm perfect. What I would say though is the people around you are so important. And, I come from a great, my parents, my sister, great family, my wife, my daughter are incredibly, incredibly supportive. And that's so important because that enables you to do what you need to do. And again, it's never going to be perfect because it can't. You're always going to be pulled in one direction more than another. And I think what allows you to do that is having just great people around you, good people around you. And so I would acknowledge that, first and foremost. Something that I've said, interestingly, something that I've said a couple of times before, and it only sort of really dawned on me over the last sort of few years. But, at home there was my dad, my mum, my sister, and now there's my wife and my daughter. So you think about the 5 really close people to me, and 4 of those people were women. And, with my mum, sister, wife and daughter, and, they've all been absolutely incredible, as well as my dad. I mean, he was the one that pushed and, taught me an incredible amount about life skills and being the best that you can possibly be, no matter what you're doing. And don't ever feel intimidated by anybody because you have the ability to be just as good as they do, right? You may have to work harder, or you may have to do something to get there, but there's no reason you cannot be what anybody else is. And so, undoubtedly, people, in terms of keeping myself sane, I'll get up every day at 5:30 in the morning, and I'll run 4 miles on the treadmill, and I'll do press-ups, sit-ups, and that is the best time of the day. It's what I call my thinking time. I mean, the amount of problems that are solved when I'm just on that treadmill for 30 minutes, I can't even begin to tell you, because you're just thinking a lot more clearly. You're not going to get disturbed. You haven't got emails, phone calls, text messages. I know that at that time of the morning, no one's going to disturb me. I'm on the treadmill. I've got my thoughts, and that's where I solve the most problems and have some of the best ideas. And so that is important. I'm a big believer that, people talk about the endorphins that exercise releases. I agree with that. And I'm also a believer that if you keep yourself in good shape, it's good for you mentally as well. Everything is balanced in that regard. And so, that is something that is important. And then, as best you can, and you brought this up earlier, you do have to find that balance. You have to find time for your family. You have to find time for other activities, your friends, and you've got to do it. And you've got to try and switch off from the mobile device. It's not easy. And again, I'm not going to tell you that I've mastered it, but you do need to be able to find, time where you can do those other things and give 100%, not do them at 50 or 60%, give 100%.
What you just said just perfectly summarized what I was going to say on the fact of you have to recharge. And I think like men like you and I feel like I can go on my adventure and the battles that I have to fight in the quest forever. Like I just think nothing can stop me. And like when I'm engaged in something and my passion's there with it, I'm willing to endure any difficulty, any type of suffering to try to get to the end result. But I hadn't recognized in my early 20s, probably because your energy is endless in your early 20s, that like you need to give yourself that space to recharge or you will start to underperform. And I started to realize the time that I was disappointed in myself is when I knew that the standard that I was operating at or what I could have been giving was less than what I should be. Those times started to haunt me. And I'm with the woman that I'm going to spend the rest of my life with. We've been together 6 years, and she's been a rock solid foundation of my life. So when I hear you say that, like, I think every good man, you need a good woman in your life that loves you, that supports you, but more importantly, believes in you.
Correct.
They have to believe in you. They have to believe that you can make it happen because like they don't have to understand the problems. They don't have to understand the stress or the difficulty of what you're managing. They just need to be able to look at you and say, I believe you can make it happen. That is one of the most powerful forces in the world, hands down. But at one point, her and we almost got to a conflict that almost split us up because she came to me and said, these are a couple things that I need. You need to get off your phone at this point of the night. You need to not work at this period. 1 day a week has to be dedicated to us and our family. And the young, immature James was like, you don't understand the amount of people that depend on me, the amount of projects I'm working on, the countless professional athletes I'm negotiating their next fight. I need to be engaged 24/7. And we got to the point where we were about to split up. And I actually had to say to her, like, okay, I'm going to try it your way, but I'm going to do it to prove to you that, like, I don't know why I thought this. The whole thing was going to come toppling down. She was right. I'm better now. I'm better now when I give myself that space to recharge. I'm more efficient. I'm more productive. You have to recharge. And it sounds like you say what so many high-level elite men and women will say in their lives, exercise and space to be quiet, to take care of your mind is a crucial component to keeping yourself on track.
No doubt.
It's crucial.
It's absolutely crucial. It's the favorite part of my day. And if I don't exercise, now I'm out of kilter. I feel it, and you feel it mentally as well, And if something doesn't quite go right, you're like, it's because I didn't get my running, and so it is so important. And look, I agree. It's like an athlete. You can't perform at your optimum capability every day because you just burn yourself out. And if you're an athlete going into a fight or an Olympic sprinter going to the Olympics, you train and then you've got some days of rest before competition, right? Because you want to make sure you are full of energy and ready to go. Your brain is like a muscle. And so you think, oh, I'm just going to keep going, but you can't. You need to sort of unplug and let your brain relax and then go again.
So final thing, and man, Lee, I enjoyed this conversation so much with you today. I enjoy this dialogue. I think you sprinkled so much gold insight that, like, if people would just look to others that they're inspired by or that are at a high level, whether they're in your company or not, and just listen to them. Just listen to their words, hear their story. You could find the roadmap for putting yourself in order. But the last thing I'd like to say to you is, you've alluded to reading a couple times. You've alluded to a couple things. are there a couple books that you would recommend, even if it's just one, that for like someone that listened to this podcast that was inspired by you, that was moved by your words, a book that's hit you the hardest, like something where people could also venture out to seek knowledge, and just, anything else you'd like to say in general about your ideology on life that will, like, you're the type of man that people should look to and say, like, okay, I'm going to learn from him because my life could be better in turn because of it. Just a book you'd recommend, any other message or a favorite quote, maybe something that's inspired you, and then we'll wrap this episode up.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, thank you, James. Again, I think two books, and I've mentioned them both today. Jim Collins' Good to Great. I think that's a fascinating book, and it's one of those books that, once you start reading it, you'll get through it in 3 days, and it talks about level 5 leadership and analyzes companies, great companies. Basically, Jim and his team looked at a lot of companies, a lot of good companies, but there were only a few great companies. And what they ascertained in that study was it was all because of level 5 leadership, much of what we've talked about today. So Good to Great would be one. And then the other one we talked about would be Moneyball by Michael Lewis. And that's just about the art of what's possible. Don't think that, we can never compete against this organization, or I can never compete against that. You can always compete. You've just got to throw the shackles off, think differently, think creatively. And that's what Moneyball is all about. Yeah, it's predominantly about baseball, but look behind the baseball. It's about having a different mindset. And so, those are two books that I would leave you with. And a quote, there's probably many Winston Churchill quotes that I could talk through, but look, again, be your best every single day. Believe in yourself. Be the best you can every single day, because the only person that controls your destiny is you, and we only get one shot at life. So make the most of it.
That is the perfect conclusion. I appreciate you spending the time with me today. I really hope this episode affects a lot of people, and just thank you for being the man that you are.
Well, thank you, James, and the same to you as well.